So far, we learned a number of techniques that hackers can use to gain access to networks, even if they use WPA and WPA2. If this happens and a hacker manages to gain access to your computer, it's game over. They'll be able to run so much more powerful attacks to spy on every single connected device and potentially even gain full control over these devices. We will be covering all of that in the next section of this course, but before getting to that section, I want to spend one more lecture showing you how to implement the security settings that I recommended in the previous lecture to stop hackers from gaining access to your network and being able to do all of the attacks that I'm going to show you in the next section. So, to implement the changes that we discussed in the previous lecture, we will have to first access the router's settings page. And to do that, you're gonna first need to go to your terminal, and we're gonna run the IP route command. This is a very simple command that will simply show us the default gateways in our current network. So as you can see, the first default gateway is 10.0.2.1. This is the one for ETH0, and the default gateway is basically the router, because as we know, the router is used as the default gateway to the internet. So this is the default gateway for the virtual NAT network that this machine is configured to connect to. And below it, we can see the default gateway for the real Wi-Fi network that LAN 0 is connected to. It's saying that the default gateway for LAN 0 is this specific IP address. Now, for you to see this, obviously LAN 0 needs to be connected to your wireless network. So if I look here on my networks on the Wi-Fi and select network, you'll see that I'm actually connected to this network, which is my current Wi-Fi network. Now, if you're being de-authenticated and you're not able to connect to your own network using Wi-Fi, then you can connect to your network using an Ethernet cable. That way, the de-authentication attack will not work against you, and you'll still be able to see the default gateway IP in here and use it to access the router settings and modify them to improve your security. Once you see the default gateway, this is the IP of your router, and this is the IP that we're going to use to access the router's settings page to modify its settings. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go to my web browser, and we're simply going to put it in the address bar and navigate to it. It's going to ask you for a username and a password. Now, in many cases, you'll find this written under the router or at the back of the router on a sticker. If you can't find it there, then look at the manual for the default password. A lot of the time it's admin, or it could be the actual network key, the default network key. So I already have my password copied in my clipboard, and I'm just going to paste it here and log in. And as you can see, we have access now to the router settings page. In this control panel, you can modify any setting that is related to the router. Keep in mind that your control panel might look different. This control panel looks different depending on the router that you have, but the settings that we want to modify are the same. So you're just going to have to look through it, through the different tabs or the different layout that you have to find the settings that I'm going to modify. Now, as you know, the main thing that we want to modify is the Wi-Fi settings. So in my case, I have it in here under this cog on the right. In your case, it might be in a different tab or in a different window or in a drop-down menu. You just want to make sure you find the Wi-Fi settings. So I'm just going to click on it in here. So in the basic settings in here, you can see you have the different bands that the router is running on. That's okay. You can see we have the network name, so you can modify it from here. You can see that it is set to visible, so you can untick this box to make the network invisible so it doesn't broadcast its name. The main thing that we want to modify in here is the security, and you can see in my case it's already set to WPA2 personal. So make sure you're using WPA2 for maximum security, and you want to make sure, as mentioned in the previous lecture, that you use a long password that is made of small and capital letters, special characters and numbers, and make it at least 14 characters. That way it's very difficult to crack. Once you're done with your settings, you can click on apply to apply the settings. But in my case, I haven't changed anything, so that's fine. The next thing we want to do, as you remember, we were able to crack networks regardless of what key they used, even if the key was complex, if WPS PIN authentication was enabled. So you're gonna need to find where your WPS settings are. In my case, it's in here in a different tab. We're gonna click on it and we're gonna make sure that it is disabled. So in here, as you can see, WPS is on in my case. So I'm gonna click on it one click to disable it. And we're gonna click on apply to apply the changes. In some routers, this will disable it for both bands. In my case, I need to manually also go to the settings of the 5 GHz by clicking in here and disable it manually for that. I got disconnected for a bit of time because when you change settings within the router, it'll need to restart. So you need to give it some time once you click on apply or save for the router to restart with the new settings. We're gonna refresh now just to see if we have it back. As you can see, we still don't have it back, so we need to give it a bit of time. Okay, so I'm being asked to log in again because the router restarted. And we're gonna go back to the Wi-Fi settings, WPS, and as you can see, it's off now. So we also wanna go to the 5 GHz, and we wanna make sure it's off as well. You might not have to do this on your router, but in my case, I have to do it manually for the 5 GHz and for the 2.4 GHz. Another feature that you might find useful is the MAC filtering or access control. You might find it under different names. This allows us to define a list of MAC addresses that can connect or should be disconnected from the network. So from here, you can select to create an allow or a deny list. So if we go on the allow list, we're going to be specifying the MAC addresses that are allowed to connect to the network. All you have to do is simply put the MAC address here, add it and save it, and then only the specified MAC addresses will be allowed to connect to the network. So that's pretty much it. You just want to make sure that you're using WPA2, disable WPS, and use a long password made up of small letters, capital letters, numbers, and special characters. You can also use the access control or MAC filtering to prevent or allow certain MAC addresses. Also, keep in mind, if you were being de-authenticated from your own network, so if you're not able to connect to your own network using the Wi-Fi settings in here through Wi-Fi, then you can connect to the router using an Ethernet cable, and that way the de-authentication attack will not work against you. Then you'll be able to come in here, modify the network settings to prevent the attacker from launching attacks against you without being de-authenticated.